Kevin, want to swing it to you with some SEC action. Kentucky at number 3, Texas. Speaking of fraudulent resumes, I don't want to throw Texas in the camp of Indiana, but it's worth maybe a marginal conversation. Longhorns are tied with Georgia, though, for the third best odds to win the college football playoff at Bet365 at plus 500. Nearly a 3-touchdown favorite against Kentucky. Total of 47 in that game. Thank the heavens. Quinn Ewers struggled against Arkansas last week in the first half, for me at least. I want to say a 13.5 point favorite, but just 4.3 yards per pass attempt against a banged up Hogs defense that was essentially holding tryouts leading up to the game against the Longhorns. But Ewers has been inconsistent. We saw it last week against a middle tier to lower end SEC opponent, granted a good home spot for the Hogs. Kentucky's defense ranks 33rd across college football in net points allowed per drive, and we saw it with Arkansas's number 1 tailback last week. Jaquindon Jackson had a big second half, which allowed Arkansas to cover the number, and Kentucky ranks 20th in rushing success rate offensively, and that's the most notable vulnerable aspect of this Longhorns defense that is pretty stiff against the pass. So can Texas get Kentucky into those third and longs like we saw were an issue for Arkansas in the first half? A little bit of the polar opposite in the second half when Jackson got going on the ground here. Also keep in mind, could be a look-ahead spot for Texas with A&M on deck next week. So, Kevin, do you see this going similarly to the narrative, potentially, even though it's at Texas, a little bit of a sleepy spot for the Longhorns against a Kentucky team that can potentially take advantage of Texas's defense on the ground?
Yeah, there are so many things in play on this one. I mean, first and foremost, I do agree that Texas is going to be looking ahead to Texas A&M. You sit there and you see Kentucky on the front of the jerseys. You look at a team that has been pretty poor since the upset of Ole Miss. I think it's really easy to be like, well, we can just kind of show up, roll out there, and get a 17-point win and be done with it. Kentucky has been monumentally bad since the Ole Miss win. Outside of an out-of-conference win against, who knows? I mean, Murray State, Mercer, it's all the same damn team to me at that point. But I think they just one team that just travels around more than Brett from game to game, just a journeyman of going from we're just going to go collect our checks. But there's only been one game in the history of this series, a 7-6 win for Texas in 1951. I was kind of surprised. I mean, obviously, Texas is a brand new member of the SEC, so there isn't that there. But you would think that these two teams would have played, but they haven't. I mean, I think that you look at the quarterback situation. A lot of people are still clamoring for the player they don't know, for Arch Manning. Bring in Arch Manning. Quinn Ewers has kind of hit a little bit of a ceiling at some points. Has not necessarily been super sharp. So at some point, does that noise start to really infiltrate the team? And everybody's like, well, when we're in our football facility, we're not listening to any of that outside noise. BS. We know better than that. I mean, you can be in there, sun up to sundown, but your people are still going to get to you, whether it's, your girlfriend or your mom or somebody's going to say, can you believe what so-and-so said about you? I think that Texas is disciplined enough not to fall victim here, and I think Kentucky's not talented enough to take advantage of any real openings. I still can't explain the Kentucky Ole Miss game. Ole Miss is a team I've watched probably a little bit more than a lot of other teams out there. I just don't understand it. I think maybe somebody told Kiffin that Nick Saban was somehow associated there, and he tightened up or something. But outside of that, I don't know. I think that Texas will be able to move the ball well enough, and that Kentucky is just going to get stymied playing there at DKR. And I think that this one is just going to go as expected.
So you like Texas laying the nearly 3-touchdown spread?
I said something. We traded notes on Wednesday night, and I said one thing, and I've changed my mind on two of them since. Just to let the listeners know, I've really thought this through. My first appearance here on this show. I don't want to look like the idiot picker on game day that never gets invited back or whatever. I did say yesterday that I like Kentucky in the points, but I think I've changed my mind. I've talked myself into it. I think that Texas covers.
Okay, Brett, what about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with your second notion there, Kevin, in that I don't know what the heck happened in Kentucky. It's like they ran out of gas after that Georgia, Ohio, Ole Miss stretch where they took Georgia to the brink. I know Georgia didn't play well, especially on the road, but they beat Ole Miss. It's just they have 4 straight FBS losses. I don't care about Murray State. I don't care about that result whatsoever. They have not scored 21 points against conference opponent this year. I know Texas doesn't have that marquee win, but they haven't really messed around with the inferior opponent. I know, they're subject to scrutiny just because they're Texas and who their quarterbacks are and all that, but they had that 10-point win against Arkansas. I think Arkansas is a little bit better than most realize, even though they're having the student section playing defense there. But they also had a 22-point win over Mississippi State earlier, which is, I think, the more comparable team and result that we may see here against Kentucky.